everybody, I'm April Deaver, multimedia blogger producer for the Office of Digital and Design Innovation. And today I'm talking to Rob Bull, Director of Innovation at the Office of Digital and Design Innovation, and Andrew Golis, Director of Digital Media and Senior Editor at PBS FRONTLINE. Andrew, can you talk to us a little bit about what you do? And then I know that Rob has a bunch of questions for you too.
As you said, I'm the Director of Digital and a Senior Editor. And I've been kind of put in a very cool place here, which is to say that I get to kind of straddle a bunch of different parts of our operation in the hopes that in having me do so, I can kind of help to steer Frontline, which is a traditional broadcast, towards what we know is going to be a different digital future. So I am a member of the senior editorial team here at Frontline, along with our executive producer, David Fanning, and deputy executive producer, Rainey Aronson, which means that I help them, or at least get to be in the room as they make decisions about what films that we make and how we manage the kinds of stories that we want to do and the feedback that we give to our amazing producers as they go out and try and get the stories that make our show work. I also manage two departments here at Frontline. So I manage our digital operation, which is about 10 people and consists of mostly editorial, but some elements of product development and design in terms of managing our website. We're starting to push into mobile products and other things like that. And then I also manage another department which used to be called promotions and is now called audience development, and is really focused, I've really merged the two of those departments together strategically, and is focused on figuring out how to build a kind of long-term audience strategy for Frontline, one that simultaneously bounces audience towards our traditional broadcast, but also understands how that audience is shifting through kind of research about broadcast and digital, and through a kind of long-term investment in membership and kind of in-depth engagement with that audience going forward. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, so obviously audience engagement seems to be one of the most important parts of journalism. You guys have, I think, a bit of a different way of engaging people, partially because you have such an independent brand in public media, and partially because you tell long-tail stories, right? You have sort of the luxury. How do you differentiate what you're thinking about in terms of engagement with Frontline from your earlier career at Yahoo and other types of journalism?
Yeah, so before this I was at Yahoo, and before that I was at a startup called Talking Points Memo. Both of them were living in the kind of day-to-day, what's I think the best way to describe it is the kind of desktop computer people at work. I think Jonah Peretti of BuzzFeed has called it the kind of bored at work network, which is the kind of audience of people who are ready to watch or click on or read something for, between 3 and 10 minutes between meetings. And that's really the audience that has been the kind of dominant player in terms of driving the way the digital media has evolved in the last 10 years. So if you look at Gawker or BuzzFeed or HuffPo or any of the digital success stories, they've all been built around playing to and figuring out how to create kind of sub-communities within the board at work network. Frontline, on the other hand, is a traditional television show and has a kind of Tuesday night broadcast that reaches 2.5 million people. And those shows, we have 150 about of those shows free streaming on our website. But a huge amount of what we've done in the last 2 years since I got here is to create kind of derivative products and complementary products to those shows that help us to kind of play in that board at work space. So we focused really aggressively on figuring out how to take excerpts of the show and additional reporting after the show that kind of allow people who aren't watching us in broadcast, who are flipping around on the web during the day, to sample pieces of what we're doing, to follow up on pieces that they might have seen on television or online at night during the day, and have kind of created with our website a kind of running conversation with a core group of a couple of 100,000 people who are kind of core Frontline fans. So the site reaches millions of people a month, but there's really a kind of deep, engagement with that core group who, they want to, after we've done some big investigation, questioning the, conviction of, someone and built, a character out in a broadcast, they want to know what happens to that person. And we've built a reporting team to kind of follow up on those stories and keep those threads running.
So in this core group, you mentioned one type of engagement, sort of the follow-on. Are there other types of engagement that you're seeing that are dominant? I would assume that maybe some of the people, because of the frontline audience, have a direct expert level knowledge of the stories that you're telling. Do you look at them adding value to the story post-broadcast, or do you tap into them pre-broadcast? And how does that work?
Yeah, so there's been a couple of stories like that. So it's a little hard to. So the broadcast, and this is something that I've learned coming to Frontline from not being in long form. Having a lead is not enough to make the commitment of going ahead and doing a broadcast, right? So one of the challenges, and at Talking Points Memo, we did a lot of work where we would get tips and leads that you could then go chase through kind of incoming email and tips and social. It's a little harder here. Those can be tip-offs that then you have to go do a lot of story development to keep pushing down the track before you can say, okay, we can make this into 52 minutes of television. There have been a couple cool examples of that, though. There was a film that we did called about airlines called Flying Safe.
Oh, you killed me on that one. I fly a lot.
The cheap airfare one, Flying Cheap?
Excuse me, Flying Cheap, and then we did a follow-up called Flying Cheaper. And I think, and this was before my time, so I may butcher the story, but what I remember people telling me was that after Flying Cheap, a lot of pilots started to flood on and say, oh, the piece of the story that you're missing is, the local maintenance and these kind of outsourcing and subcontracting of maintenance. And so that resulted in a follow-up story of Flying Cheaper, which was the kind of magazine segment that we did, I guess about 2 years ago now. So there are examples of that. Other ways in which we do kind of audience engagement. So we have, in a way that a lot of television shows, we've built a kind of big conversation that runs kind of as a back channel to the broadcast itself. So as an example, tonight we have a big political show that's going to go to air depending on the time zone, either right before or right after the State of the Union. And we'll have the filmmaker and we'll have a lot of the reporters that were involved in the show live tweeting the show, and we basically encourage a whole kind of community of reporters and commentators and viewers to kind of participate in a big conversation about the show as it's happening. We also have post-broadcast shows or live chats. So the day after, for example, tomorrow, we're having to kind of cover a live chat where the producer takes questions about the making of the show and the reporting in the show, and that's always co-hosted by another reporter on that beat. So tomorrow, Chris Saliza from the Washington Post is going to co-host a conversation about tonight's film Cliffhanger, and those are great because it enables, in this case, Saliza will put the show in front of his audience, which has a kind of in-depth knowledge and expertise around the topic, and allow them to ask questions. And then Saliza will bring his expertise to asking questions about the film when we put that chat in front of our audience. So with Cover It Live, those chats are embedded in both places.
So last question, or one of maybe April has a question about audience engagement, but apart from like just mass audience participation, comments, the number of people involved, what are the measurements that you look at or that you think is most important in Frontline, especially as a public media organization that is different than just a pure body count of engagement?
Yeah, it's a tough question. So we've been talking about this a lot here internally, and I think that I don't know if this directly answers your question, but I think it's a useful thing to understand about how we're trying to think about this. So online, whether it's in the kind of board at work network or in the kind of nighttime lean back digital network, people organize themselves online in the context of certain kind of tribes, right? So a certain snarky urban demographic goes to Gawker, or in the same way cable news organizes audiences around tribes. And so beyond the broadcast context where you're trying to kind of shoot out something that somewhere between 1 and 10 million people see, you are trying to kind of appeal to certain kind of core tribes. What we are trying to do in a kind of the most abstract sense is we're trying to build our tribe, and that's a tribe that's a hard one to build in the sense that it's not appealing to people based on religion or ethnicity or class. It's appealing to them based on kind of pretty abstract and highbrow things around transparency and accountability and fairness and the importance of narrative as a way to kind of understand and put together more complex stories. So what we're trying to do in general in our digital work, but this is why it's connected to our audience development work, is build our own tribe, and the only way we can do that is by going to other tribes and saying, like, we have something that's interesting to you, come over, see it, and that's outreach online, that's outreach in broadcast. And then if we're doing our job correctly, we're converting those people, right? So everything we do has to be infused with the kind of values that we're talking about, and we have to start to surface those values more and more explicitly to make the case to those people when they show up, this is what we do, this is why we do it, this is why you should join this tribe, keep coming back, be a friend of ours on Facebook, sign up for the newsletter, allow us to kind of stay in touch with you, and we're going to kind of build a community of people who are invested in these kind of core tenets. And our hope, at least, is that those are kind of core tenets that serve the kind of greater public good, and that the bigger the community is that's kind of participating in that, and the bigger the community is that wants to share that work and be a part of that, the better.
Yeah, kind of following up with what Rob was talking about, what do you guys look at for metrics specifically, or what you guys would consider your key performance indicators on the web side of things?
So, at a basic level, I'm interested in two things. I'm interested in how many people we touch, and I'm interested in what the depth of their engagement is. So, Google Analytics is the best we've got. I mean, you can pay a lot of money for more sophisticated tools. We're public media, and we don't. But Google Analytics will at least tell us, what's your uniques number? How many people are you reaching? And what's the depth of their engagement? So it matters to me if we reach, 1 million or 2 million or 3 million people, but that's insufficient in the sense that, like, fundamentally what Frontline is invested in is the idea that there is more to be gained from spending more than 2 minutes with an idea, and that complex ideas require time and require storytelling to build up to and to really kind of land intellectually. And so if I get 5 million people but they're only with me for 2 minutes, that's not that valuable to me. I mean, I'll take it. It's not useless to me because maybe I can convert those people into the other kind of people. But I want to get out into those networks and convince people to, watch the full broadcasts or watch or read a longer piece that we do in text. And that if they're not actually doing that at some level, there's a lot of people who do kind of short form journalism really well, and they can go those places.
I was just going to ask one more question. When you guys are actually looking at your pages, when you're setting up your pages and you're in charge of figuring out what information to put on, I guess with the follow-up, on what is it, the Wall Street series and all that, there's just pages upon pages upon pages of information and links and videos. And how do you pick and choose what you want to put on those follow-up pages, and how do you strategically organize it so it's really easy for people to follow up and come back and want more?
Right. So we kind of do two things. So there's basically a stream of reporting that we do into and out of a film, in which we'll start to publish clips from a show or advanced reporting on a show. We've done a couple of different projects, some of them that have won prestigious journalism awards, where we're breaking news on that story well before we even have commissioned a broadcast. So this was before my time, so I can brag about it without seeming obnoxious. We did a film about 2.5 years ago now called Law and Disorder that broke a lot of ground on police shootings in post-Katrina New Orleans. And they did an amazing job of publishing iteratively over the course of 6 months before the broadcast ever aired, surfacing just incredible stories of police misconduct. The film and the reporting resulted in, I think, 8 policemen going to jail, a federal oversight of the New Orleans Police Department, which is kind of notoriously corrupt. And And so that's one way that we do this, which is, again, either follow-up reporting afterwards or iterative reporting beforehand. And then the other thing we do is we really try to take each of these films and surface all of the artifacts, the transcripts from the interviews that we do with kind of newsmakers, the documents that we've dug up in the course of our reporting, things like, I'm trying to think of an example, the timelines that we've built to make this all possible. The more material we surface just as a kind of show of transparency, the more credibility the kind of reporting we do can be, because when you do the kind of work that our producers do and that we do in general, inherently you're going to piss people off, and you're going to alienate certain audiences, and frankly, if you're doing it well, that's what you're doing. If people wanted this information out in the world, like it would be. And so showing your work to as much as possible and really trying to be as transparent as possible with the film sites that we build allows people to, even if they themselves don't actually go and dig into that material, allows people to believe that there's a certain credibility to everything that we're showing for them.
So that leads me to an interesting question. Oh, as an aside, before I go into some of the innovation stuff that you're doing, the Law and Disorder seems to strike me as the first big relationship that you had with ProPublica. Is that correct?
I wasn't here, so I wouldn't want to say that definitively, but yeah, I think that is one of the kind of projects that forged that relationship. Yeah.
And it seems like that was, if I recall correctly, that was the thing that really put ProPublica on the map at some level too, about being able to work in that longer form and having real impact. So that was great to be innovative with them. But you guys you particularly have been very innovative with all of these artifacts. And the one that I would love to have you sketch out is the thinking and the process for developing the David Headley piece and the Perfect Terrorist work, and the work that you did around having the journalist talk about David Headley's life. How did that all come together?
Yeah, so another kind of long-term piece of all this. So one piece of this is you assume there's a certain broadcast, you assume that there's a traditional film, you're building out other kinds of products around it, you're building into and out of it. Another strain of thought here is the idea that just as text turned into something different in all the forms that we see text now in terms of hyperlinks and embeds and short form and iterative blogging and all the innovations that we've seen in the way text is presented online in the last 10 years, video will become its own, an actual digital artifact, right? So most video that we've seen really until the last year or two is just kind of small television, right? So like YouTube is great in the sense that it's really democratized the distribution mechanism, but it's still fundamentally linear, non-interactive television. Maybe there's interactivity built around the video itself, but but they hadn't yet kind of broken into the box. So we've had a kind of running strain of thought here trying to figure out, okay, what does it look like when you actually break into the box? When you actually say, like, what does a documentary look like, or what does a story look like when it is fundamentally interactive, when it's fundamentally a digital artifact? So we had a kind of get together last about a year ago now, or maybe it's 10 months ago now, where we invited a couple of frontline filmmakers who were really creative and thinking about this space. So Tom Jennings, who was in the David Coleman Headley piece that you're talking about, was one of them, and Tom was also the producer on Law and Disorder, so he had kind of already experienced the possibilities of digital as a kind of new form, both in terms of publishing and in terms of reporting. And Tom had done a film about David Coleman Headley, who was the American who was really the kind of guy who helped mastermind the terrorist attacks in Mumbai. And that 165 people were dead, and they took lay siege to the Taj Mahal and all the rest of it. And he was an American. And he was an American who, before he signed up for Lashkar-e-Taiba, was a heroin smuggler and a DEA informant, and had had this amazing life in which he was born in Pakistan and then went and lived in Philadelphia. So after he made his film for Frontline Broadcast called The Perfect Terrorist, Tom was still obsessed with this idea that Headley's life, and it was only made possible by this like really complex web of relationships that he was able to play. So he was kind of always double-crossing people. It's a kind of like spy versus spy story. And he brought that idea to this forum and said, here's what I'm thinking about. I have in my mind this visual web of people and the story to tell about them. What would that look like as an interactive? And we went out of that forum into a hack day in which at first they built what was essentially a radio piece, which as you listened to the audio, it moved across a kind of timeline. And as that timeline moved, it surfaced more and more people in what was basically a web of interactive people showing the relationships he had to different law enforcement and to different kind of terrorist groups. We then had the idea of, well, that was kind of cool. What if we actually had Tom like literally draw the interactive on a whiteboard and then animate over the video itself, so that as he's talking, you can actually click on the people who he's talking about as he draws their relationships to each other, and pause the video and go watch other stuff. And then Tom had the cool idea, which was that he remembered and there was these YouTube videos that had flown around of Picasso painting on glass. I don't know if you guys have ever seen these. And so we took that idea to this, and we went and rented a big-ass piece of glass, or bought a big piece of glass and put it on clamps, and shot a 7-minute video of Tom essentially talking to camera and drawing these dots that represented these people. And then we hired this great interactive firm called Secret Location that really animated over that the whole network, and then built nodes so that you could click on them. And if you were clicking on, his mother, you could go then see a slideshow of pictures of her and her life. Or if you were, clicking on one of his wives, you could read about the times that they tried to tell the American government to be aware of him.
And what did Secret Location use to do that?
So I'm not a product dev, so I don't want to sound like an idiot by talking too much about this. But Mozilla has a whole new library called Popcorn that is kind of premised on a lot of these ideas. So they used Popcorn.js to do it. They also have a kind of consumer-friendly tool based on Popcorn called Popcorn Maker that allows you to basically take a YouTube video or something like it and kind of do pop-up videos over on top of it. And so they're one of a couple of people right now that are trying to play in that space and say, okay, what does an interactive video look like? What does kind of really visual storytelling that's also interactive look like? And so sorry, go ahead.
No, we've been messing around with Popcorn Maker and Popcorn too, and it does offer a lot of. The Popcorn Maker side offers journalists on the line to be able to produce an audio slideshow or a simple interactive video very quickly. And Popcorn.js allows for people who have some art to the video, which obviously Frontline and Secret Location had for David Headley's piece to really demonstrate a new look of video, which is great, fantastic.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that it's so hard to figure out how to do this right. But one of the things that I think worked so well about that was that the form followed from the story, which is to say that we didn't say what if we did an interactive with a video and there was a web, and then okay, what will the story be? It's that Tom had this idea of this of this visual set, that we started with the editorial concept, and you started with a producer who really knew what he was talking about and who could write this script, and then you started to kind of build the form with that as the lead. And that's one of the things that we've been trying to sort out here as we've been learning how to do this is where do you start? And I think that worked well partially because it started from the editorial brain that Tom had, and then we were able to kind of create the circumstances to make it possible.
So we're running out of time. I have two more relatively, hopefully quick questions. April, do you have any questions that you want to ask?
No, go ahead, Robbie. Go ahead.
All right, so the two quick questions. The first question is maybe, Andrew, you could sketch out a little bit about how you and your audience engagement / digital team interact in the putting together a film. When do you guys come in? I know that you're a senior editorial strategist, but when does the team come in on products? Let me answer that one first.
Yeah, I mean, it varies, right? So there are some projects that, like from the beginning, we're having conversations about what people can be gathering in the field that would be useful for digital, that we're having conversations about what we can be publishing. We have a film that's going to air in October of next year about the NFL and concussions, and we've already had a website up gathering data about the NFL and concussions for 3 months. They're not even in the edit room. They don't even, they haven't decided like exactly how they're going to tell their story, but they were starting to gather up this information and realized it could be a cool digital project, almost a year before they even broadcast. Other projects, we come in later, and we come in more as kind of, okay, we've got a film. What are the artifacts that we can push out early? How can we kind of apply a layer of transparency to this? I mean, it really varies, and it depends on the story and the appropriateness of kind of these kinds of different strategies around transparency and iterative publishing. It also depends on the producer and their level of comfort. A lot of times, you just have producers that are a little more old-fashioned and don't really know how to think this way and come in late. A lot of times it just depends on the actual production schedule of the broadcast. At the end of the day, what they're doing here, my bosses and the filmmakers, is better than everyone else in the world in the sense of long-form television, and so it's hard to do by itself. And it's hard to do this well by itself, much less with all of these kinds of built-in long-term strategies and digital publishing efforts. So sometimes, you're just crashing on some important thing, and the digital stuff comes in as it can. But first and foremost, we've got to create the best possible film, and make sure that it's fact-checked to a T and all the traditional basic stuff.
All right, last question. So it's a bit of a generic question. So tell me 3 things that you were really proud of what happened in 2012 for you guys, and tell me 3 things in 2013 you're looking forward to. Anything.
So I think the Headley project was a big one for us last year, both because I think that we were proud of what it was, and I think we learned a lot from it. And I think it's really important to me, at least, that things like that get out in the world, so that they attract talent that's interested in those questions, right? So we are about to hire a designer, an interactive designer, who really found out about, thought that they might work for Frontline for the first time because they saw that piece. Otherwise, it might not have occurred to them to come work for us. So that's, I think, a good one. What else? We've done a couple of things around transparency with video, where Frontline has this long history and tradition of publishing transcripts, and one of the things that we've done in the last year is take that to a kind of new level for some tentpole projects, where rather than just publishing text, we actually, and this is our managing editor Phil Bennett and assistant managing editor for digital Sarah Moody have taken a big lead in this, where we're actually building websites where for The Choice, which is our big election film about the 2 candidates, for example, rather than just having transcripts up of the people who we interviewed, we actually put, I think, 8 hours of video up, in which you have, a full half-hour interview we did with Ann Romney, the full hour interview we did with the guy who was, Barack Obama's kind of stoner buddy in high school, and all of those interviews are basically we cross-cut them so that they're chunked up, and you can sort them by tag. So you can look at everything that has to do with Obama and drones, or everything that has to do with sorry, one second. Or everything that has to do with Mitt Romney and abortion. So I think that's a really cool project because it's taking what has always been a really righteous idea here and making it more user-friendly so that people can it's more accessible. People actually want to engage in that stuff, and it's more likely to draw an audience in addition to just being cool. I guess the third thing I would say that I'm proud of here in the last year is, we've made a lot of this stuff work because we've built a kind of a deep collaboration across a lot of different departments here at Frontline. I don't think people can or should underestimate how hard these things can be just organizationally, even within an organization that is as fundamentally progressive as Frontline is about these questions, you're still fighting against kind of a lot of ingrained muscle reflex, just to kind of the way it's been done, the way that it should work, the things that we need to do. And I think it's a huge statement and a testament to kind of Frontline and to the people here that, like, the digital team and the audience development team, the digital team and the audience development team and the post-production team, the film teams and the senior editorial team, you've got this very complex mechanism that's starting to do a different thing than it used to do, and that's a hard thing to pull off. And I think that's a cool thing that we've done that I'm hoping will kind of keep us moving and changing.
So some quick hits on 2013.
Oh, geez.
Twitter-like phrases.
Twitter-like things that you can tweet.
Come on, you were 40 under 40 for, I can't remember what it was, and I think you talked about Tumblr as being important. So you got
30 under 30.
30 under 30, I mean. Sorry, I didn't mean to add 10 years.
That old man. Yeah, so one of the things I am interested in the coming year is what are the platforms that keep that keep making it easier to do interactive video. So I'm interested in Ziga, I'm interested in Popcorn, I'm interested in what those guys do. We're going to keep playing with that stuff. I don't necessarily know what it'll look like in the end, but I think it'll be great. I'm excited about a couple of kind of digital-first investigative projects that we've got going here that aren't fun. Didn't start with the broadcast, started with the digital team, started with a reporter that we have here who's really been digging up some great stuff. You'll start to see some of that stuff coming in the next little while. I'm trying to know what I can say that doesn't break news that I'm not supposed to break. Which probably overestimates people's interest, but yeah, I mean, I think that we have a lot of actually just on the film side, a lot of pretty kicking projects that are going to be coming up this year. That will be, a film like The Untouchables, which is a broadcast we did 2 weeks ago about Wall Street and prosecutions after the financial crisis. Those are huge digital products, and I think that one of the things that we're really proud of on the digital side, and that knowing the films that are coming and knowing how much more organized we are and how much more collaborative we are than we've ever been, I can only imagine how big some of these projects that are coming in the next year are going to be as digital plays, even though they're kind of traditional films. So it's the football film as an example, and others that, I can't tell you about.
Well, I'm looking forward to all of those. I think probably one of the things that I saw as the two most important decisions that David Fanning made for the legacy of Frontline was bringing on someone like Rainey to help lead the editorial and the filmmaking, and realizing that they needed someone like you as a senior editorial strategist right at the top. And so you guys have really been rebuilding Frontline as a totally new type of organization, and the films you've been producing are something that are like sort of must-see TV in our house. So actually, must-see video in our house.
Tell your friends.
Yeah, I will. So Andrew, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, Rob.